Hello everyone and welcome to the Business Analyst demonstration. So today's session I'm focusing on explaining what a business analyst role is about, what is it that a business analyst would do on a day-to-day basis, and then we'll learn about what is it that we would learn as part of this course, right? Now this slide crisply summarizes what a business analyst does, right? So before I get into the details about what your day-to-day activities or what are your knowledge or skill sets would just stop. Let me introduce you to uh, IIBA. IIBA stands for International Institute of Business Analysis. It's a non-profit international organization which oversees the profession of a business analyst role. So it basically guides this profession, right? So it establishes the standard and best practices and standard policies, right? And even offers a certification called as CBAP, Certified Business Analyst Professional, right? Now that certification is aligned or more suited for people who are experienced business analysts, right? So it's more like to establish their credentials to take the certification, right? So if you are looking on to getting onto a role of business analyst, that's it has its own limitations. You cannot take the certification right away. What we're doing here is we are aligning our course to the CBAP certification, although I would assume that you don't really have a any basic understanding about what IT projects are and what a business analyst is expected to do, right? So to summarize, I'm aligning the course to IIBA, right? So it's but the focus is not to take the certifications, but onboard people who don't really have a business analyst background and who aspire to get into a business analyst role, right? Now that said, that's the given context. Let's first understand what a business analyst would do, and then we'll get into the details about what is it that we'll cover in the course. Okay. Now this slide clearly summarizes what a business analyst does, right? So the IIBA, International Institute of Business Analysis, has published a guide which would basically help a business analyst understand what is it that that you're expected to do, right? So it categorizes your knowledge into these 6 basic areas, right? Now I'll explain each one of them in detail, but the course again is aligned to each one of these areas, and we'll structure our course and understanding based on these 6 knowledge areas, right? Now again, before we get into the course content, right? So let's spend a few minutes just trying to understand what a business analyst is. Right? Now, if you look at any organization, it has multiple business units, or it focuses on a particular business. Like if you look at the bank, it would focus on maybe the retail customers, the commercial banking the organizations, or maybe your capital markets, right? Similarly, if you take manufacturing, it focuses on manufacturing, on supply chain, or CRM, right? So there are multiple aspects or multiple business units, in each and every industry, right? Now, in the current context, in the current industry, any industry you take, right? So everything needs to be supported by some technical systems, right? So take any industry you look at, right? So be it the retail industry, the travel industry, the healthcare, or your banking, everything has systems to support their businesses, right? So now, how are these systems developed, right? And who manages these systems? And how do you link these businesses to your technology, right? So I mean, how do you develop these systems? How do you manage these systems, right? So to support all this, you need a technical or an IT department for every organization, right? Now, a business analyst forms an integral part of this, right? Now, what is your role per se in this overall scheme of things? Let's spend some time to understand. First step, you as a business analyst would identify what are the key systems which would help your business achieve its strategic objectives, right? So, or what kind of systems would help you increase your business efficiencies, right? So basically you're identifying the systems which you can take up and which will add value to your organizations, right? So this is basically what we do as part of our enterprise analysis. We identify opportunities, we do the feasibility studies, right? So whether the project is operationally feasible, is financially feasible, is technically feasible. So all these analysis is done, and finally you build a business case out of it. So basically you'll say, I have to invest 1 million, and it would give me, let's say, 2 million out of it. So there is a 100% return on investment what you're getting, right? So this is basically the business case what you do. So that's what is done as part of your enterprise analysis, right? A business analyst gets involved in these activities. So that's the first step. Now, once the projects are approved, right? So let's say, any project, if you take a project and let's say it takes you $1 million to implement, right? The budget needs to be allocated to that, right? So enterprise analysis ensures that the budgets are allocated, and then you have the money to onboard all the resources required to implement the project and execute it, right? So that's the role of a business analyst. Now once these decisions are taken that the project needs to be the project is approved and then the budgets are allocated, right? Then you onboard the key people. So you onboard a project manager, onboard maybe the technical architects, and onboard a business analyst who would plan for the detailed implementation of the project, right? So does it take 6 months? Out of the 6 months, how much does it take to identify the detailed requirements? How much time does it take to design your system? How much time does it take to develop your system, right? So the detailed project plans are prepared, right? And then your baseline frameworks are prepared, like how do you manage scopes, how do you manage your changes to the project, how do you manage the risks for the project, right? Who are the various stakeholders involved in it? So a lot of things needs to be identified during your planning phase, right? So as a business analyst, where are you involved? You would be involved in planning for all your requirement related activities. So how do you understand the requirements? How do you document them? How do you support the validation of the solutions which are prepared? So these are the various activities which you will support. So your planning would these are the inputs you would be providing in your planning phase of the project, right? After your plan is prepared, the detailed project plan is prepared, the next logical step is you need to understand the detailed requirements. So how do you engage the various stakeholders to understand the detailed requirements, right? Now at a broader level, we all understand, or that we need to talk to the customer to understand the requirements, right? But that's just one way, right? Now you just go and talk to him. Now whatever he explains, and then you understand. So that's one way of engaging the customer in understanding the requirement or eliciting the requirements. So what are the various other techniques? So IIBA suggests there are 10 ways in which you can actually engage the customers. What are the contexts in which each one of them would be effective? Which of these techniques you should which you should be using, right? So this is something which you learn as part of your requirement elicitation. So we learn those 10 techniques in which you can engage a customer or the various stakeholders in your as part of your organization to understand the requirements, right? And which is the most effective way of understanding the requirements, right? So we learn those details when we talked about the requirement elicitation, right? Now simultaneously, when you are understanding the requirements, you also want to document it, right? Now how do you document it? So are you just writing a big verbose document listing out all the requirements, or you want to make it more clear without any ambiguity, and such that the developers can understand in the same way as what your customers are explaining it, right? So this is a challenge which a business analyst has to he has to bridge the gap between the customer and then your technical team to ensure that both of them understand the requirement in the same way, right? Now, we cannot ensure that this happens by just focusing on a on a language like English, because it can be interpreted in multiple ways, right? So some frameworks have evolved. So when there were process-oriented languages like BASIC, Fortran, Pascal, right? So there were some procedure-oriented analysis techniques. Then object orientation came. Then you came up with UML, right? So UML is a technique to document requirements. You have come up with the new ways of capturing the requirements like agile models. So user stories have evolved. So there are multiple ways in which you can document your requirements, right? So the final deliverable coming out of this is a business requirements document. Now this is a detailed document which basically explains about what is it that the system should provide, right? So what are the key features or functionalities the system has to provide? So that we capture in your analysis and documentation phase. Now there are some frameworks which we will use, like a use case or a user story or a data flow diagram or an ER diagram. So we learn these various techniques in which we will document the requirements, right? Now once these requirements are documented, then it's the responsibility shifts to the development and the design team. So your requirements are converted into a design documents, and then your development happens, and then it's finally tested, right? So as a business analyst, the industry expects you to contribute to this testing process. You need to verify and validate the system. So you need to have a basic understanding about the various stages of testing, right? So what are the various steps involved in testing, right? What is a unit testing? What is a system integration testing? What is user acceptance testing? How do you analyze your defects? What are the various types of testing? How a test case is prepared, right? How a test case is executed, right? And what kind of analysis is required to identify the defects? So this is something which you learn as part of your solution assessment and validation. Apart from this, you as a business analyst are ensuring that all the stakeholders' communication needs are met, right? While the project manager also shares this responsibility, since you are the person who are communicating with the various stakeholders, be it the customers or the technical team, right? So you need to be aware about how to prepare a communication plan, how to ensure that the communication is ongoing, how to ensure all those various templates for your communication are identified upfront, and how to manage your conflicts in a project, right? So these are some of the things which we learn as part of our requirements communication, right? Now, so this business analyst book of knowledge, right, or gives us a very good framework to segregate these knowledge areas into separate parts, and we can focus on understanding each of these knowledge areas in detail, right? So that's what we would do as part of our course, right? Now I'm completely aligned to that IIBA's business analyst book of knowledge, right? The course is specifically for IT business analysts, because the term business analyst is across industries. So I specifically clarified right at the start of the course that this is specifically for IT projects, and this could be across any industry, be it healthcare industry or banking industry or any industry, manufacturing, travel, healthcare. It could be any industry, right? But if you are implementing a new system, you are developing a new system, so this is the this is what you do as part of a business analyst role, IT business analyst role, right? Now, I presume that most of you who are coming into this course are from a non-technical background. So we absolutely have no idea about how is an IT team organized, how is a client's IT or client's organization like, right? When a project is formed, who are the various key stakeholders involved in it, right? What are the various phases of a typical project? What are the various types in which you can execute the project? So we have absolutely no clue about it, right? Now, when you get into an organization, you need to have a basic understanding of who are the key people involved in it, right? What are the various phases of the project? Who manages what responsibilities in a project, right? So this is something which is fundamental for any person working in the IT industry, right? So the initial sessions I would focus on that. So we'll learn about the IT industry. So typically we'll focus on the IT organization of the company, then understand what are the key teams involved in it. Now, when you're outsourcing it to a technology vendor, how are they organized? And when a project team is formed, what is the typical team structure? What are the roles and responsibilities of each and every person in that? And when a project is started, what are the various phases of the project, right? So there will typically be an initiation, then there would be requirement analysis, design, development, testing, and then your maintenance phases, right? So we'll focus on each of these phases, understand what key activities happens, what are the deliverables coming out of each of these phases, right? So you broadly get a the bigger picture about how things work in an IT industry, right? Now once we understand that, then we would get into the 6 knowledge areas what we looked at in this slide, right? So the enterprise analysis, planning, elicitation, analysis and documentation, communication and solution assessment and validation, right? So each one of them you would get into the details and then understand in detail what is it that's expected out of a business analyst, right? So we are going in a chronological order in which a project is started. What is it that you plan? You contribute in the planning phase. How do you understand the requirements? How do you document it? How do you ensure that the communication is ongoing? How is the system tested, right? Now, usually enterprise analysis is the first step, but I would cover it at the end of it because it's a complex topic. You would need some basic understanding of the rest of the phases to understand this, right? So we'll assume that the project budgets are allocated and then start off with the planning phase, understand the rest of the phases, and then try to understand what is it that we do as part of our enterprise analysis. So that's the only deviation in the way a typical project is executed and our course outline, right? Now I'll spend a few more minutes explaining you the details about each of these knowledge areas. So as part of the planning phase, we'll understand the key stakeholders of the project. How do you document them using an RACM matrix or in any other way, right? So we identify what are all the activities which a business analyst needs to do. How do we estimate for that, right? So does it take 5 days or 10 days or a month or 2 months, right? How do you understand the estimates, right? How do you create a work breakdown structure? How do you contribute to the overall project planning? So we'll learn that. We'll also learn about how to manage the scope of the project, how to manage changes coming into your requirements, how to manage all the requirement related risk. We'll learn that. After that, we'll focus on the requirement elicitation. There are basically 10 ways in which you can engage a customer to understand the requirements. We'll learn those 10 techniques, right? And each of these would be followed by some real life case studies, so that you get an understanding about how things work in an industry and what is it that you're expected to do as a business analyst. So it will be more of an interactive sessions during these case studies, wherein we'll try to get into the role of a business analyst and then think through what are the activities which you do, right? So that gives you some first-hand kind of experience about how to deal in these kind of situations, right? Then you would spend time on requirement analysis and design. Once the requirements are understood, you would parallelly start documenting them, right? So we'll understand the various techniques in which the requirements could be documented, right? So whatever be these techniques, you would end up creating a business requirements document, right? So there are multiple ways in which you can document your requirements, be it using your user stories, which is UML based, or data flows or ER diagrams or process models, workflows, swim lanes, mind maps, any technique it could be. Finally it gets into a business requirements document, right? Now the end deliverable of this is your business requirements document, right? So The BRD, or the business requirements document, is an outcome of both your elicitation, wherein you understand the requirements, and then your analysis and documentation design, so wherein you document your requirements, right? So though it's simultaneous activities, we are considering as separate knowledge areas for the ease of understanding about what is it that's expected out of it, right? So a business analyst plays a key role in churning out this business requirements document. So we'll go through the business requirements document in detail, understand what goes in there, what are the functional requirements and what are the non-functional requirements, right? So what is it that you cover as a business analyst, and basically by the end of this phase of this knowledge area, you'd have clarity about how to document your requirements for a typical IT project. Now, this forms a significant part of the course. Your elicitation and analysis and documentation is the key or the crux of what a business analyst does. Right? The rest of it can be considered as additional functions of a business analyst. But if I have to just summarize the role of a business analyst, it would be just understanding the requirements and documenting them. Right. So these are the key roles what a business analyst does. Right. Then we'll also learn about how to create a communication plan, how to baseline your various artifacts or templates for your communication, what are the modes of communication, how to identify the information needs and document them in a communication plan, how to manage conflicts. So these are some of the things which you'll learn as part of your communication. Right. Then we'll focus also on the testing. A lot of times we just focus on SIT and then UAT because the other testing is unit testing, which is generally handled by the development team. More details about it when I get into the course, but broadly these are two levels of testing. System testing and integration testing is handled by the vendor team or the team which is generally developing this solution, and then the user acceptance testing is done by the client, so who would ensure that the system is meeting the requirements what they have given, and if it meets it, then he would sign off onto the requirements. Right. So that's what we do as part of our solution assessment and validation. Now, like I mentioned earlier, enterprise analysis is usually the first step wherein you conceptualize projects, identify opportunities, build a business case for it, right? And identify what is the return on investments, present it to the senior folks in your organization and get budgets allocated, right? So we also learn the basics about the business architecture framework like Zachman, Poldat, or we have TOGAF as another business architecture framework which is coming up. Now, in fact, if you look at this, enterprise analysis is actually evolving into a different role called as an enterprise architect, right? Now, during the initial stages of your career, you don't really contribute much into this enterprise analysis because it's a very complex activity, right? Now, I can even safely say that enterprise analysis would be a future role of what a business analyst would do, right? So usually, these are done by very senior folks in the organization. Once the opportunity is finalized and budgets are allocated, then you onboard a new guy to start planning, understanding requirements, documenting, and contributing on the various other knowledge areas, right? And any other miscellaneous things which I think are required. I've covered the basic topics here. There are other things which I would discuss as part of the course. We'll learn about them as well, right? The focus audience would be the fresher graduates or people who have basically no understanding about how IT projects are executed or what a business analyst is expected to do, right? Absolutely no prerequisites or prior knowledge of anything to join this course, right? I assume that you absolutely have no knowledge about anything about IT projects or a business analyst, right? So that's where we start, and then we'll learn the fundamentals. The focus is a lot more on the fundamentals, ensuring that you have no prior knowledge about IT projects, and ensure that by the time you complete the course, you will be able to work on an IT project as a business analyst, right? Now the training material is well organized, have organized into multiple PowerPoint presentations, which you'll use during the course of the during the uh, during the course. There will be additional reading material which I'll give you so that you can spend some time understanding these details, the concepts what you have learned in more uh, detail, right? So there are a lot of templates which which you're expected to create, right? So not templates but the documents, right? So the templates provide basically a structure of what actually these documents consist of. So we'll discuss these templates once we get into the that particular topic, and we'll discuss each of these templates in detail, so that by the time we complete the course we are clear about what is it that the uh, you know each of these deliverable is about, and what is it that we as a business analyst needs to contribute. Okay, coming over to the skills required, you need to have good analytical skills, right? So you should be able to understand the problem, right? So clearly articulate and then try to depict it, right? So for that you need to have good interpersonal and communication skills as well. You need to uh, interact with people, understand what the problem or the opportunity is, and analyze it and document it, right? So these are the key skills I would say, right? Then a basic understanding about the IT SDLC, software development life cycle. SDLC stands for software development life cycle. You need to have the basic understanding of that. That we would cover in the initial couple of sessions. So you don't really need to know about this third skill, right? A domain or a functional knowledge is good to have. It helps you to understand the requirements easier. So it makes your requirement elicitation job easier, right? Now, having said that, it's not mandatory that you need to have a domain or a functional knowledge to get the business analyst role, right? If you have good analytical skills and interpersonal skills, you should be able to understand the requirements and document it, right? But some projects could be really complex, right? So rather than depend on a particular person who has no understanding about that particular domain or the functional knowledge, right? So the recruiters would prefer somebody who actually understands the business. Right? So you can gain this over a period of time. There is nothing which we can do at this point in time to uh, attain the domain of functional knowledge. It either comes from your previous educational background or maybe your work experience, or you could spend some time to understand that particular domain knowledge before attending an interview, right? So it's as simple as that, right? It's finally boils down to your commitment levels and how focused are you in getting into that particular job, right? So I would say this is more like a the domain or the functional knowledge is more like a uh, add-on skill rather than a basic skill, right? So basic skills, I would say, you should have this good analytical skills and interpersonal skills, right? It helps you understand the requirements. Analytical skills helps you in documenting the requirements, right? So that's the kind of skills that you would require. Another point I would like to clarify here is that a lot of people have this misconception that you need to be a technical guy to get into the role of a business analyst, right? Now, I think by this time you would have understood that there is nothing technical what we are doing, right? So we are just trying to understand the requirements. We are documenting them, right? Now, we need to learn about some frameworks in which we can document it. So that we will do as part of this course. Now, so that's where your role as a business analyst ends, right? So you don't really need to design or develop the systems. So there's specific roles for that, like a technical architect or a developer to do those roles. So your role is clearly carved out. So you can just understand your requirements and then document it, right? So be clear with your role. It doesn't really require any functional or the technical knowledge, right? So don't get intimidated by all the technical jargon or since you're working in an IT industry, doesn't mean that you have to be a technical guy, right? So that's a key message what I wanted to say. right? Now, from a business analyst role, you have future career paths again, right? So you can get into functional consulting or a, basically you gain a lot of understanding about how a particular industry works. So you could consult the clients and help them out, figure out what's the best way of doing things, right? So you get into this the process engineering or business consulting kind of roles, or IT, specifically focusing on the IT systems. You could get into a project management role because you're already coordinating with a lot of folks like your clients, your developers, and you're managing half of the stuff what what a project manager does. So a logical role progression is also a project management, right? You could get into a business development role as well, right? So rather than just focusing on understanding the detailed requirements, you could interact with your prospective customers, understand what their requirements are, and then propose an IT solution to meet that, right? So that's what a business development guys do, right? Or you could just, if you just like the business analyst role, you could stay in that role, manage larger teams, manage complex projects, and then work as a business analyst, right? So that's some details about the role of a business analyst and what we would cover in this course, right? I hope the session was useful. Yeah, feel free to drop in your questions or queries. I would be glad to answer them, right? Thank you. Thanks for attending the session.